Greetings, Magic community, and welcome to the Road to an RCQ mini-series recap special. I had my sealed RCQ this past Saturday, and it didn't go as well as I would have liked. I finished with 3 wins, 2 losses, and a draw, and we're going to talk about it, talk about my deck. But really, this is an episode about failure and how to deal with it. I made some mistakes during this tournament that I think cost me. And I think it's important to talk about that kind of thing a lot more openly than we typically do in this community. We talk a lot about winning, and I understand that that gets more views than talking about losing, but I think it's important. So we're going to go over my deck. We're going to talk about each round and how it went, and what I could have done to improve. And at the end of this video, we'll talk about what is next for this series. So this is the deck that I put together with the pool that I opened. Um, First thing that jumps out is there is not a lot of removal here. I've got a Blooming Blast, which is an interesting removal spell in that it only deals 2 damage, which does miss a lot of things in this format. But the fact that it can do 3 damage to face is also pretty important. So it's an interesting card. Polywallop is good, obviously, and then Conductive Electricity is pretty expensive, but is effective at what it is doing. And then I have Hunter's Talent. So these are my only 4 removal spells in the entire deck. And High Stride is there because I needed to fill it out a little bit short. And I don't think High Stride is that bad. I think a one-off High Stride is perfectly reasonable. I also had a Fountain Port and an Oak Hollow Village in this deck. But as you can see, it's very creature heavy. Sunshower Druid is a little bit out of place here and did feel pretty weak when I was playing it. Valley Might Caller is, on the other hand, quite good in this deck. I had a number of raccoons and rabbits and frogs, so it triggered off of pretty much everything except for my Steam Path Charger and the 3 Tree Root Weaver, obviously. The 3 Tree Scribe is basically just a 2 mana 2/3 in this deck. I have the Sticky Tongue Sentinel, but mostly I want to use that to rebuy Hunter's Talent whenever possible. So, typically this is not going to get triggered off of what I'm doing, although there are times when opponents bounce stuff and they have to consider that this is going to get bigger when they do that. So, it had its purpose, and it 2 mana 2/3 is also just like totally fine. Um, the Corpse Spray Cultivator is the only thing that forages in the deck, and I don't have any food generation. So that was mostly off of graveyard stuff, although still pretty good, to be completely honest. Druid of the Spade, again, it's another one that really only triggers when my opponents gift me things, or if I have a Head of the Homestead, or I happen to cast one of my few Offspring cards. So this deck isn't super synergistic. It's mostly just good green red stuff. Valley Flamecaller was quite good in this deck with the Steam Path Chargers and a number of the raccoons. Head of the Stone Homestead, obviously really good. Junkblade Bruiser was a really good top end for this deck. The games where this felt the best were ones where I was able to get out a Roughshod Duo, or what's the other one that the Brambleguard Veteran, and I had a Raccoon Heavy plan. The expending was really quite good in this deck. Uh, yeah, so that's the deck. This is the deck that I played for the entire tournament, and we'll go over round by round how things went and what I could have done better in a moment. So round one, I played against a green-white deck that was very good. They had a Valley Quest Caller, which is the 2 mana. Uh, I think it's a 2/3 that pumps all of the white typed creatures. They had a Warren War Leader. They had a Jackdaw, the one that brings something back. And this is the round that I got the draw in. Actually, I won a pretty well contested game one. Game two, I made a really bad mistake. Actually, I made a couple of bad mistakes. The first one was I was pretty far ahead. I was able to remove their Valley Quest Caller, and they cast the Jackdaw bird that brings something back. And I just totally blanked on the Quest Caller being a 2 mana creature instead of a 3 mana creature. and I killed the Jackdaw thinking that they could only bring back their, uh, uh, I forget what the card is, the 2 mana 2/2 that pumps the whole team, the Warren Elder. But as it turns out, Warren Questcaller or Valley Questcaller is in fact a 2 mana creature, and they brought back instead. And I had no other way to deal with it. Obviously, I have very few removal spells in this deck, so other than Polywallop or Conduct Electricity and a Hunter's Talent at exactly the right time, I just can't remove a 2/3, and that turned out to be a huge problem. I was still in the game for a while. The second huge mistake that I made, though, was that I should have conceded about 5 minutes before I did. A friend of mine was with me, and he said after the game, "Look, you just gotta know when you're beat and give it up so that you have time for game three." And that was entirely correct. That's a lesson that I never really thought much of. I've been playing a lot online. I have not played a lot of high level paper, so it wasn't really a consideration that I had. Never even occurred to me that I should just concede and get the game over with. We started the third game in the match with, I think, maybe 90 seconds left on the round timer. And it was unquestionably going to be a win for me. I went first. We got to my second turn. Sorry, my third turn. I was pretty far ahead already. They hadn't cast a single creature yet. Uh, at the end of my turn, I went to pass the turn with about 5 seconds left on the clock, and they stopped me at the end step and cast Paw Patch Formation to draw a card and make a food token, which caused the timer to expire, which meant that I was in turn zero and they had turn one. And the way that the match ended up, had they been turn zero and I been turn one, I win that game without question. I completely ran them over. I ended up the life totals at the end of that match ended up being me at 20 and them at 3, and they had 0 creatures out, and I had an entire board. Um, had I conceded game 2, even 2 minutes before I did, I win this round, and I don't end up with the draw, which, I think this is the loss, or it isn't a loss. This is the result that tilted me the most over the course of the day, um, because it was so obviously a win for me. They had a good deck. They did pretty well in the tournament. I don't remember how they ended up, but I know they won their next 2 or 3 rounds, and they ended up higher than me in the standings. I ended up in 19th out of 61st place with my 3-2-1 record. So this one got to me a bit, um, but I think the lesson here, I think the important lesson here is one, read your opponent's card. Don't just assume you know what they cost. And two, if you're in a losing position and it's pretty clear with the timer going on, it is absolutely worth conceding a game, even if there's like a very small chance that you could win. I don't even know if it was possible for me to come back at that point. It might have been. I have a lot of power in this deck, and they didn't have a lot of removal either, so there's a chance that I come back and win this game somehow. But I didn't, and had I had even one more minute at the end, um, I win this round. But this one ended up in a draw, and we'll go on to match number 2 in a second. So this is going to be a short one because truthfully, I don't remember a lot about this match. I won this round 2-0. I completely ran over my opponent both games. They put up almost no resistance. I don't think that they were flooded or mana screwed in this match. I don't fully remember. They were playing also white green. I think they were playing white green as well. And no, I'm sorry, they were playing black white, and they just didn't really do anything in either game. They had also drawn their game one. I assume they were playing some sort of bat life gain strategy, and it just never materialized in the match we played. So this was an easy 2-0. They never were in either game at any point, and I just fully ran them over. So on to match 3, and I am 1-0-1 at this point, playing against someone who was also 1-0-1, and they were playing a blue red deck. And they said at the beginning of the match before we even started that they, sort of this is what their pool forced them into. We talked a little bit afterwards, and I guess he didn't think his deck was very good, um, which I think is reasonable. Red blue is one of the weaker color pairs in the set. They had a pretty good version of the deck though. They did a lot of damage with the Spark Duo and some other effects like that. I didn't. Well, we'll get to it in a second, but I ended up losing a very close game one. Um, could have gone either way. There's no like misplays on my part that really stand out. Um, but I lost that first game. Played the second one. I did make a mistake in this game that I just baffles me to this day. To this day, it's been a couple days, but it still just baffles me. Like I had the Keen-eyed Curator in hand on turn two, and I had my opening hand had Forest Mountain and Keen-eyed Curator. It was my only 2-drop, and I don't think I had a 1-drop, although maybe I had a Sunshower Druid. I'm not positive. But so turn two comes, and I'm looking at their board, and I play a land, and then I go to tap the lands to cast Keen-eyed Curator, and I realize that I had played the Mountain. I don't know why. I think I just grabbed the wrong card out of my hand. So that was a mistake. But ultimately, I went on to win the match or the game anyway. This one wasn't particularly close either. They didn't really get to do very much. Their setup never really went well for them. I got a lot of my removal, so I was able to get that out of the way. And then we went on to game three, and this is one where I think I could have won the game in retrospect, but the decision I made in the moment I think is reasonable. So it was a pretty aggressive game from both sides. Um, and it came down towards the end to both of us were at 5 or less life. And they had the boar in play, the 5/5 haste, trample, reach creature, red creature, which I had not seen the entire match. So going into the round and they cast it, I had not been playing around it because it didn't even occur to me that that was a thing. They had not played it once the entire match. They cast it. They swung in for 5, brought me down to 5. My turn. I had a pretty anemic board at this point because they had been bouncing stuff and removing stuff. Um, I had a decision to make because my hand consisted of Head of the Homestead, Junkblade Bruiser, Brazen Collector, and Sticky Tongue Sentinel. So knew I needed to attack them because I needed to put pressure on them. Otherwise, I was just going to lose this game. And um, my decision came down to I had 6 mana available to me, so I could do one of three things. I could Head of the Homestead, get out the 3/2 body with the 2/1/1s. Um, so what? That's 3, 4, 5, 5, 4 worth of stats. I could play the Junkblade Bruiser, which is 4 or 5 worth of stats, or I could play the Brazen Collector and the Sticky Tongue Sentinel, not bouncing anything, just getting it out there so to make sure that I had some kind of block. So again, 5, 4 worth of stats. So 5, 4, 5, 4 over 3 bodies, or 4, 5. I didn't want to play the Junkblade Bruiser, even though that was the best blocker for the boar. Um, because they had shown a lot of bounce effects. And if they bounced my Junkblade Bruiser, I was just going to die. So that didn't seem like a great option for me. So it came down to Head of the Homestead or the Brazen Collector Sticky Tongue Sentinel plan. And I ended up choosing the Head of the Homestead idea, getting the rabbit out there along with 2/1/1s. And as it turned out, they did not have a bounce effect that turn. I ended up blocking with the Head of the Homestead and going to 1. And then on their turn, they were at 4 with 2 creatures untapped. No, sorry, 1 creature untapped. They had the looter, the 1/1 that can't be blocked. Um, I was at 2. I apologize. I was at 2. They were at 4 at this point. And I attacked with my 2 rabbits. Had I cast a Junkblade Bruiser, I would have won this game because I could have expended and made it a 6/6. But I didn't. Had I cast a Sticky Tongue Sentinel and the Brazen Collector, I couldn't have won this game, but I think I could have extended it another turn. As it turned out, the Head of the Homestead was the worst of the 3 options. And I ended up losing the game. Had I again cast Junk Labor, I think that my decision was rational. I think it was reasonable for me to cast ahead of the homestead to get the extra bodies out there, um, but it just didn't end up the way that I wanted it to. And in retrospect, the Jungle Bruiser would have won me the game. The Brazen Collector and Sticky Tongue Sentinel may have won me the game. It's hard to say. But I think this decision was reasonable and defensible. And I did lose this round, and it was a match that I could have won, I think, had things gone just very slightly differently. But I lost, and this one wasn't anywhere near as upsetting as uh, the draw was. Uh, as that was like definitively a win. But at this point, I'm 1-1-1 and moving into round number 4. So round number 4, I don't think I made a play mistake in this game. I ended up playing a white blue deck that was basically perfectly suited to play against this deck. They had 3 copies of Repel Calamity, the 2 mana white card that destroys a creature with power or toughness of 4 or greater, which I have quite a bit of in this deck. And I have things that pump. The Brambleguard Veteran has 4 toughness, but also pumps all my raccoons. So even my Roughshod duo is in danger if it gets pumped. Roughshod duo, if I expend, it's in danger of something getting pumped and killed. They had 3 of those. They had 2 copies of um, uh, Sonar Strike. They had multiple creature counter spells. So the deck was like perfectly suited to play against this deck, and I ended up losing game 1 pretty handedly. In game 2, I was on the play. I was on the draw almost the entire game. I think I won maybe 1 die roll all day. But was on the play in this game, and I thought that maybe I could get there quick enough to run them over. And it did start that way and seemed like I was in really good position to win this game. They were empty handed. I had a pretty big board. Um, they had Wrath at one point. They had cast a Starfall Invocation, but they only had a Life Creed duo that they were able to bring back. And I was quickly able to rebuild my board to, again, pretty overwhelming and was going to win the game in a turn or two. Then they top decked the blue season, drew 5 cards, and a bunch of them were removal cards. And I just, got ground out from that point. So I don't think I made any play mistakes in this game. Their deck was like perfectly suited to beat mine. The mistake that I think that I made is not deck swapping, because as you know, if you've been watching this series, I've been going into Magic Online leagues and building a different color pair every single round when I've been doing them, because I think this set really uh, encourages doing that kind of thing. I think a lot of pools in this set, more than is typical, are capable of providing multiple functional decks. And while I do think my green red deck was the best version of my pool, I think it's important in this format to have the ability to pivot and attack from a different angle. Now, if you look at this deck, obviously this deck has a lot more removal in it. Nocturnal Hunger is consumed by greed, Savor, Parting Gust, Feed the Cycle. Permagita is obviously not a removal spell, but it kind of is. I have a lot fewer creatures. I've got Coiling Rebirth. This deck is just, and this deck isn't as prone to getting blown out by Repel Calamity. I have 1 creature in this deck that has more than 4 power or toughness. This deck is way more suited to playing against the deck that I played against that round, and I didn't swap into it. And the reason I didn't swap into it is, like I said, I thought that maybe on the play, I had a better shot at getting out to an early lead and just running them over. Um, had we gone to a game 3, I 100% would have switched to this deck on the draw, but I didn't do it, and I do think that was a mistake. I think seeing the way the game 1 went and seeing how perfectly suited to play against my deck their deck was, I should have just not even thought about it and swapped this deck for game 2 and game 3 if we got to one. Um, I was a little concerned. I hadn't played this deck all day. I was a little concerned that it was underpowered. I did get to play it a little bit afterwards. As I said, a friend of mine was there, and once round 6 had completed, there was a good amount of time. We both finished our game, so we just played, and I played this deck, and it was actually a lot better than I had given it credit for. And I think that I would have had a much better result this round had I swapped to this deck. I do think it's a difficult thing to do. You want to put forward your best deck, and that's what you're trying to play in sealed. But again, I think this sealed format is so two color dependent if you're not like certain kinds of green decks where splashing is okay, that it was just the right thing to do to swap into this deck for this match. I think this is the only match that I would have swapped into it for, even the loss in round or the loss in round two or round three. I think that my green red deck was better suited for that match, but it was the right thing to do here, and I didn't do it. And I think that's the biggest mistake I made. And the biggest lesson I think from this round is in this format, try building a second deck. And if it does, you really want it to do something your original deck can't do. My original deck was mostly creatures, very little removal, and most of my creatures were fairly large. This deck has way more removal, so if I played against another creature heavy deck, it's possible this would have been right to swap into. And this deck has smaller creatures, so something like 3 Repel Calamities are just dead versus it. They're just dead cards versus this deck. And again, I didn't swap into it, and I should have. But this was another loss. So at this point, I'm 1-2-1 going into round number 5 of a 6 round tournament. Now, round 5 is sort of the opposite of round 4 in that my deck was perfectly suited to beat their deck. They were also playing a green white deck, but they had mostly smaller creatures and nothing that I would say, and a lot of bird synergies actually, and nothing that I would really say that I was worried about. Much like in round 2, I basically just ran them over. Neither game was competitive. I think maybe they did like 4 damage to me total. They did have a moose, which is good, but like by the time they were able to get it out, they were so far behind that it just didn't matter. Um, this round, there's not a lot to take away from this round other than sometimes your deck is just suited to beat your opponent's deck, and that's all there is to it. So now I'm 2-2-1 going into the final round. Uh, I again pretty clearly had the better deck of the two of us. They were also playing blue. They were playing blue green in this instance, and they had some pretty good frog synergies going on. Um, but they couldn't really, for the most part, mount any kind of defense. I made a pretty bad mistake in this match that I do think is worth thinking about and learning from. I had the Roughshod duo out, and then so I played Roughshod duo and then played Alania's Pathmaker, and I tried to resolve the Alania's Pathmaker trigger first. So I exposed the card and then said, okay, now the Russia duo is the expend happens. And they rightly called out that because I exposed the card for Alania's Pathmaker, I had missed this trigger. I believe that is correct. So, that was a mistake. And uh, yeah, it's just be careful with the triggers. I guess they were right to call me out. I did it wrong and I missed the trigger. Fortunately, it didn't ultimately end up mattering. I think I would have won the game that turn had I not missed that trigger. If not, the following turn for sure. The not having the trample was a real problem that round. But uh, I ended up winning the game eventually anyway. I won this round 2-0 as well, and I finished the tournament at 3-2-1 and in 19th out of 61 19th place out of 61 people. I just missed the top 16. Had I won in round 1, I definitely would have made the top 16, which was where the prizing cut off. So didn't end up getting the second promo card. It is what it is. Let's go over a recap of the whole tournament in a moment. So ultimately, I am pretty disappointed with my result. Not even my result, my play from this tournament. With a little bit tighter play, a little bit more experience playing paper tournaments with a timer like this, I really think that I could have top eighted this tournament. I think the deck was, well, not perfect, was good enough that I could have put up a better showing. The person I lost to in round number 3 with the blue red deck ended up as the number one overall finisher in the Swiss rounds. Um, they finished with a record of 5-0-1. And again, I really think I probably should have won that match, but that's fine. I don't know that I would have been satisfied with anything less than a top eight, to be totally honest, and that's probably a little unrealistic of me. Sometimes things happen, and you don't always get the results that you want, and that sucks. But um, I'm glad that I went. I would love to do another sealed RCQ. Currently, there are none within 150 miles of me that are advertised anywhere. So if one shows up, I'm definitely going to go to it because I had a great time in this environment. I like playing competitively. I like playing in paper. Again, I think that I'm a lot better in paper than I am on um, online, but I'm a lot less experienced at this point playing paper than I am playing online. So things that I just shouldn't miss, or little particularities of like the timer. Again, knowing to concede early enough that we have plenty of time for round three. Not even a thing I was really considering. Wasn't even thinking about the timer, to be totally honest, and I should have been. Um, and just stuff like that. Just small stuff like making sure to read your opponent's cards very carefully. Again, I thought Valet Quest Caller was a 3 mana card, not a 2 mana card, which is surprising because I play that card in my sealed league. I have two copies of it in my sealed league, no less. But Magic is a complicated game, and there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. Um, so I just missed that interaction, and it's honestly possible I would have lost that game regardless. I can't say for sure that I would have won that game, but I think I would have. I certainly should have won that match though, because game three was no contest, for sure going to be my game. Um, and I think that even had I won round one and finished the tournament at 4-2, I think I'd be a lot more satisfied. It's really that draw that is tilting me a little bit because it was such my issue. But yeah, finished 3-2-1, finished in 19th place. Hopefully, get to do it again. And let's talk about what is the future for this series. So, as I mentioned, there are no sealed RCQs in my area in the foreseeable future. That might change. I hope that it does. I love playing limited. Would love to get another shot at it. Uh, Everything around me, however, is currently modern, and I am not particularly interested in playing modern. Not just because of Nadu, although that is a piece of it. I don't want to. At this point, it makes no sense as Nadu is around for another week, and I own none of the cards for that deck, or at least I don't own most of them. So I'm not going to buy into it. Nadu is going to get banned in a week. Um, I think that is as close to 100% as anything gets in Magic. It would be unconscionable for them to not ban Nadu at this point. So I don't know exactly what Modern is going to look like post the Nadu ban, but I don't have a Modern deck currently. I'm not sure what I would buy into. I would assume some version of Energy is going to be the best deck after the BNR next week, but I don't know for sure. And Modern is pretty expensive, so I think it's unlikely that I buy into it. Had I won the RCQ and I was going to a Modern RC, it would be a different story. So I think that Road to an RCQ is likely to go on hiatus for a while. I will have a video next week that is probably going to be either some version of limited. Maybe I'll play more sealed. Maybe I'll do a draft. But it might be standard. I might just start playing standard more regularly as a way to get ready for the next RCQ season. My LGS is going to have a store championship sometime soon, and I am interested in playing in that. So I might just start playing standard as a way to get into that. We might play a number of different decks and see how that goes. But I'll have a video next week. I'm not 100% sure on what's going to be yet. If you have something that you'd like to see, if you prefer to see draft or sealed, or you prefer to see standard, definitely let me know. I am interested in any of those formats. So, uh, we'll see what happens. Um, that's a wrap on this mini series of Road to an RCQ. And even though it felt it's interesting because the Pioneer RCQ I went to, I felt like I played well, but Waste Not was the wrong deck. It just didn't work. This is a little bit the opposite. Even though I finished with a much better record, 3-2-1 is obviously much better than um, 1-4. I think I went at the Pioneer one. Um, this is way less satisfying, and that also could be partially because the Pioneer RCQ I went to was the first RCQ I've ever been to. Who can say? But this felt a lot worse. Even and my deck felt better, and it felt like this is more of a failing of me than it was of my deck. And I don't even know if that's necessarily fair. The other than the draw, um, I think the and there was some misplays along the way. Obviously, that's always going to happen. It's always worth knowing when that happens and knowing just if you're going to make a mistake, don't make it a second time. Making a mistake one time is never the problem, even if it results in something happening that makes you feel bad, like finishing this tournament with 2 losses. Making a mistake one time is always excusable, always, always. Making it a second time is when we start getting into, well, maybe you should have learned from that the first time. And there are certainly things that I did. I will learn from the future. The Keen-Eyed Curator play, where I ended up playing a mountain instead of a forest, just totally on autopilot. I mean, that is a mistake I won't make again. I can guarantee that. The Valley Quest Caller thing, where I just didn't notice that it had the mana value that it had. I won't make that mistake again. So it's always good to learn from. As long as you're learning from your mistakes, you're improving, and improving it should always be the goal. And I think that next time I play in a paper tournament, I'm not going to make that clock mistake again, right? Um, it's just one of those things. So, uh, yeah, just moving forward, I'm going to learn from my mistakes, even though I don't feel great about them now. I'm not upset that they happened, even if I am upset with the overall result. I think that if I had played slightly better, slightly tighter, with slightly more wherewithal during this tournament, I really feel like I could have top eighted this tournament. And I think it's also worthwhile not just to notice your mistakes, but to celebrate what did work. The fact that I think that with a little bit more learning and experience, I could have top eighted this 61 person tournament. Uh, and I genuinely believe that I think is important to note because it does mean that I had been questioning before I went to the Pioneer RCQ if I was good at this game. And while I don't think I'm the best version of myself at this game, I do think that I have the potential to be someone who can top eight an RCQ. Beyond that, I don't know. I haven't played in that environment. I hope to find out one day. But knowing that I can top eight a 61 person RCQ, uh, I have that capability in me, is something that I'm going to use to drive myself forward and to play better and to just post better results in the future. You never know what you're capable of until you're in a position to show it. And even though I fell short, knowing that I can make that step is important and I think a healthy thing to keep in mind going forward. So that's where we are. And I'll see you next week. And until next time, good luck. I hope tomorrow's a better day.